long time ago, there's a group of Lakota people. They lived in this location, and it was kind of in the where we live today in that area. Today's reservations are remnants of our homeland. By the way, a lot of people, they like to say, yeah, the white people came and they stole the land and they marched the Indians to the most desolate lands that nobody else wanted and made them live there and call it a reservation. That's not always true. Yes, that happened to some Indian tribes, but a lot of Indian tribes, it didn't happen that way. Instead, what happened was that they stay on their land, but most of it was stolen through treaties, through treaties that tricked Indians out of land, and it ended up separating them from each other. And then from those little islands, you could say, those developed into reservations. So in Lakota country, our reservations are remnants of our original homeland. Okay, that's how it is for us. So when I say in our area, it's we're still there. Yeah, it's just that we're we don't have it all. Anyway, one time out of the blue, they're starting to lose young girls. They wake up in the morning and a girl will be missing. Usually before puberty. Yeah, it could be a baby. It could be girls 9 years old. Yeah, but one thing they noticed was that the girl didn't reach puberty yet, and every morning a girl would be missing. So they set up guards to stay up through the night, because they were saying, at that time there's no horses. Yeah, so they used dogs. The dogs were watchdogs. But whatever was happening, the dogs were not sensing it. So some warriors, one of the warrior societies decided they're going to stay up all night and watch what's going on. And here, one night, they heard a flapping sound. So they said, they were whispering, "Look over there, look over there." And here something settled on a teepee, on top of a teepee. And here they saw like a shadow going into the teepee from the top. So they went over there. They're listening like that, and they could hear, it kind of moving around inside that teepee. So with the really fast movement, because see, they planned for this, yeah. Because they didn't know what to expect, but they planned for anything. So when what they did was they knocked the teepee down incredibly quick, and they held down the the edges with this they just hung on to it, and then they made a fire right away. And so when they would start saying, okay, and they said in their language, to not move, yeah, and but there was something still moving, so that way they knew that whatever that was not Lakota, because they didn't understand, yeah, so it was really moving, and so they slowly, these warriors would reach under and they would grab a family member and pull them out until only this thing was in there. So they held it down, and then they proceeded to beat it with sticks. Yeah, they threw rocks on it, and somebody said, "Don't kill it." Yeah, and so then they waited till the sun came up. When the sun came up, and they cut, the teepee that they use buffalo robes, yeah, that makes the teepee. They cut that, and they brought this thing out, and here it was a man. Yeah, it was a man. He looked Indian, and long hair, everything like that. And he wore a cape. I mean, like 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 around his back kind of thing. It was covered. He had a hump in the back. So they thought he was hunchback. So they didn't think too much of it. And then they spoke to him, but he couldn't understand because it's a different language. But in those days, Indians developed this sign language, and that's how they would talk with each other. For Indians from different tribes. So they did that. Yeah, they were able to communicate with him, and from the sign language, they learned that that he came from the south. He said he traveled a long distance, and he said that the people were they hid from people. He said they always are moving. He said they don't they don't like to come out during the daytime. He said they live in caves, so their time is the nighttime. So they tied him up to a pole, and they were gonna wonder what should we do with this guy, because they knew that there's something wrong. Another thing was that he really stunk. Yeah, that's another thing that was interesting. That the smell was something they never smelled of. They never smelled that odor before. Now, in Lakota culture, in the Star Knowledge stories, there's this. There was a time period where you have this entity who lives in the sea, and her name is Unk, and she was cast there. Originally, she was a sister friend to the grandmother Earth. At that time, the Earth was very young, so you can't call her grandmother. Okay, not yet. She's very young, very tempestuous, and these two were sister friends. But she got jealous of Unk, and she has more power than Unk, so she threw Unk in the water to stay. And because of that, they're at that time period, this Unk has she wants to cause trouble for the Earth and anything that is on the Earth. So she creates these creatures that are able to go on the Earth and cause problems. Yeah, to anything, plants, animals, people. Yeah. And then also she created creatures that are in the water so that when you drink the water, you could get sick. Yeah, and so it is, and these things that she created, they stink. This is why these Lakota people were suspicious of this thing. Is it really stunk, and they never smelled that stink before. So from the Star Knowledge information they have, they know that the beings that are this way come from this Unk, and that they're meant to cause problems. Yeah, they cause contention. And one little side note here is that one of the beings that she created was a turtle, but the turtle didn't cause problems. The turtle, whenever there was danger, the turtle, would just pull its arms and legs and tail and head into its shell, and it had protection. So the turtle was for itself. Yeah, the turtle didn't feel like causing problems. The turtle didn't feel like doing anything good either. Yeah, but the one thing was that the turtle can go on the land and it can go in the water. And this is something that the Thunder Being really liked, because these creatures that this Unk created, see, what they cause problems on the land, and then they go to the water. Yeah, and the Thunder Being cannot go into the water. So the Thunder Being thought, what an opportunity here, yeah, to make an alliance with the turtle, so that the turtle could have some power from the Thunder Being to cleanse the water. So that's why they have an alliance today. Yeah. So whenever you have a pond, if there's no turtle, if no turtle shows up, you should go get one because the turtle will take care of your pond. It'll keep it clean so that fishes can be in there. See, they really play an important role. And even though they're just a small little animal, yeah, they really play a sacred role. So they are a sacred animal in our culture, turtles, yeah. But this was created by Unk, but it didn't follow Unk's instructions, yeah. Had a mind of its own. I kind of like that. Anyway, that's just a side story. This thing, like I said, the Lakota people tied it up because it stunk for one thing, and based on their star knowledge, that this could be a what's called Nkjehila. Nkjehila are these creatures that this created that are meant to cause problems. They're designed to be very troublesome, and they were thinking maybe this is one of them. Yeah, and so they that's why they tied it down, as I keep saying here, and so they decided, they talked to it again some more, and they wanted to know, okay, where's your people now? He said, they're at a certain location, and they went over there. Here, there was nobody there, so they came back and they said, "You lied to us. There's nobody there. So you better tell us where they are, or we're going to kill you." And these things are really selfish. Yeah. So he realized that they probably will kill him. So he decided to go ahead and tell them the truth. He said He said that you have to walk. He said it took him 10 days to walk to their camp. He said he walked 10 days nonstop, and so he said that's where they're at. He said so. They decided, okay, should we believe him this time or not? Yeah, what do you think? And they said, okay, we'll try him out this one time, and they said if nobody's there, then we'll kill him. Yeah. So they decided to send a scout group down that direction. So so they went 10 days, nothing. Yeah, there was absolutely nothing. So they turned around and came back, and then they told him, hey, there's nobody there. So he started to panic. Yeah. And these Lakota people said, okay, we're gonna kill you because there's nobody. You lied to us. So they proceeded to cut his head off. Yeah. And then they noticed something when he fell to the ground. They noticed, hey, this cape, he never takes it off. Yeah. So they said, let's see what's under there. So they took the cape off, and because they thought he was hunchback, yeah, but they realized that there's something odd. So when they took that cape off, he wasn't hunchbacked at all. There were some wings on the back, and they were kind of brown, green, scaly kind of wings, and they were like, holy crap! What the hell is this? Yeah. So then they realized, okay, when he said it took him 10 days, obviously he didn't walk. Yeah. And so they said, okay, what if it meant that it took him 10 days flying? Then that would mean his people are even further south than they thought. So they said, okay, something has to be done because this guy is taking these girls. Yeah, now we know how they're disappearing, and they took a guess, at what they're doing with these girls. So they decided, okay, let's take his cape and we'll take his wings. Yeah, they cut his wings off. They put the wings in the buffalo robe. They cut him up in pieces, and they decided to take him back because they were going to. You see, he really stunk bad, and they felt that, okay, if they leave him, that they might get suspicious. His people might get suspicious because they won't have his smell, even though they have the wings. They wanted to make sure, so they cut him up in pieces so that way they didn't have to carry the body. Yeah, so they put it in bags, and then their plan was that when they got close, they were gonna, take these pieces out so that when they come near, nobody will think anything because he stunk so bad. What's the difference between a dead one and the way he already smells? Yeah, when he's alive, I mean. So, so they went and they went for many days. Yeah, they went for about almost 2 months, and here they found they found this cliff, and there were a bunch of caves in there. They just stayed and decided to just watch and see what happens. And then, sure enough, as it got dark, these things would come up, and they saw them flying around. There's a whole bunch of them, yeah, like a family, like a tioshpai. There were women and children and old ones and men, and then they noticed that sometimes that several of them would come back with girls, with Indian girls. These girls would be crying and screaming, and they'd take them into these caves, and then maybe the next day they're throwing out the bones. So at the bottom, there's a bunch of skeletons down there. So they're like, well, we're right. So then they decided to, okay, let's, what are we going to do? Yeah. So this guy said, okay, let's camp down a few ways down the road here. The road, I mean, that down the area here, at the foot, yeah. And let's make a soup and feed these guys, and because they're gonna come and they're gonna get suspicious, and they're gonna come, and we'll welcome them with soup, and let's feed them with this guy and see what happens. Yeah, because they couldn't battle them because there was too many of them. So then they did that. Yeah, and they went off. Some of them went off and they killed a buffalo, and then they proceeded to make their soup, and they're going to use that smell of the buffalo soup to disguise. Yeah, they're going to mix it with this man that they cut up. This man with wings. Sure enough, a group of these guys came walking in. Yeah, they put robes on their wings to make it look like they were Indians too. So they came to these Lakota guys and said, "Hey," with sign language. They said, "What are you guys doing?" They said, "Yeah, we're just passing through the area." I said, "Why don't you guys come and eat with us?" They said. So they said, "Yeah, okay." So they fed them some of the soup, and most of it had buffalo. So they're like, "Geez, this tastes good. It tastes better than buffalo soup for some reason," they said. "Yeah, we have a special herb that we brought with us from our country," they said. "And we use it in our soups." And these guys said, "Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, it's too bad our people can't eat this too." I said, "Well, why don't you invite them and bring them down? We have lots of soup. We can eat soup all night long." So these guys said, "Yeah, that's a cool idea." So they invited the rest of their people down, and they all were feasting, and everybody was eating the soup, and then slowly they started getting sick. And then they realized, hey, these Lakota guys, they're not eating the soup. They didn't even think of that, yeah, because they were so into the taste. And that now these things are starting to get, they're starting to get sick, and they're starting to hold their stomachs, and they're rolling around on the ground. And finally, one of their leaders got up and said, "What's in this? What's in this soup?" And they said, "Well, hey, we know who you are. We know that you're stealing girls and eating them, and you can't do that anymore. So we're not going to let you do that anymore. And you're eating one of your own." They said, and this guy went crazy after that. And so now they're all laying on the ground and they're sick. So the Lakota guys were able to destroy them after that. Yeah, even the kids, they went and because they're not human. Yeah, so they went and destroyed all of them. They cut them up into pieces. They made a huge fire, and they burned these things for several nights and several days, because that's how many of them there were. Yeah, there were several hundred of them. They wanted to make sure they burnt all the way to the ash, so that there's nothing but ashes left. Yeah. So they did that, and then they burned some sage in that area. Yeah, because and then they cleansed that area, and they said there's something. This is really bad area. All these years that these people lived here, they've been eating girls. And so that's an unhealthy energy. Yeah, that's an unhealthy energy that they left behind. Maybe they were there thousands of years, and all that time, they're these little girls that they're eating them alive. They don't even kill them. Yeah, they eat them alive. And just think of all that energy that these girls are in sheer terror as they're being eaten, and then that's how they die. And look at all that energy that's left behind from the girls and from these people who killed them and ate them in this way. Nobody can come here. They said this is a really not a healthy area. So even though they saged, they burned it and smudged it and everything, and they met with, they went around from different tribes, and they told them the story, and they told them what they did. And they said and go over there yourself, you can see. Yeah, and they kept a couple of wings so that they could show them, what this was. Yeah, so they went there, and and they realized, yeah, that because a lot of tribes lost little girls this way. Yeah, and so they parted in peace, and they hopefully they got rid of all of them in North America. Do you see what I'm saying? So what could these things have been? They only came out at night. Yeah? What could have they been? And they had these wings. Could they have been gargoyles? Could they have been vampires? It's an interesting concept. And because of the vicious nature of these beings, they cannot be, there is no way to enter into a peace treaty with them, because a group of them will break it. They may not always be one united group. Maybe one faction will go against the other one. And so whatever treaty they make with the Indian people, a part of them are not going to keep it. Can you take that chance? A group of them might go against the main group and start attacking Indians. Then it just makes matters complicated. So they cannot exist. They cannot be allowed to exist, because women have a very special and sacred connection to the earth. They are life givers. Human life forms inside the human body. It started by males, but it forms with females. And it forms inside the female body. In the beginning, we're all female. Yeah? And then some of us start forming another thing, and then that's what makes the male body. But in the beginning, everything is female. So when you have a species that is coming to eat only girls before puberty, that could lead to the extermination of the human race. Can that allow to be happen? To happen, I mean. You see? That's why they had to eliminate all of them, so that the people may live. You can imagine, that based on this individual with wings, on its back, you can imagine how when the Catholic priests learned this, they say, "Oh, that's see, this is evidence. Your stories come from the devil." You see what I mean? So this is why, in the beginning of the reservation time, that a lot of our stories were. How can I say this? Our stories were basically banned. We were banned from speaking our language, doing our ceremonies, and telling our stories. So we were hit emotionally and spiritually in that aspect. And plus, we couldn't leave the reservation in those days. So now we can, but back then we couldn't in the beginning of the reservation time period. They were like prison camps. And so we had to eat whatever the government gave to us, because not being able to leave, that also meant we couldn't have anything to hunt. So no guns, no knives, you see what I mean? No spears. So we had to just eat whatever the government gave to us, and that was very unhealthy foods, and that resulted in us getting diabetes, hypertension, heart problems, heart disease. And so, as I said, we're hit spiritually and emotionally from not being able to practice our ceremonies and speak our language and tell our stories, but we're hit physically too, not being able to eat those healthy foods. So we became sick in those three areas, physically, spiritually, and emotionally, and that then forced us to become mentally weak. We became weak-minded. And so by that time, the priests are saying, hey, your stories conflict with the Bible, so that means they come from Satan. And we began to believe it because we were weak-minded by that time. So we were told not to talk about those things because that's evil. So today, a lot of people, they don't like to talk about things like the thunder being. They try to say, yeah, this is a thunderbird that cleanses the ground, but what they don't like to admit is that this being is a hermaphrodite. It's male and female at the same time. And with the Unkjegi, there's many different kinds of Unkjegi. Some of them are giant snakes. Some of them are like dinosaurs. Some of them are like the Bigfoot, that you hear about, and like this in this story, this being that looked like a human but it had wings. So all these things, people, when they hear them, they don't believe them because they never heard it before. And so for those people who do know these stories, they don't want to talk about it because the churches said it was evil. So that's why you don't hear about this, and that's why you don't read about these kind of stories in books. Most of the stories that you find in books are incomplete, and they're dualistic, and they're Christianized. There's just very few areas where you can find the stories in their original form. Very few areas. And that's the Walker collection and mine. Those are the only two areas where you're going to find these stories in their original form, and it conflicts with the Bible. And it says things like reincarnation, and that there's no heaven, there's no hell, there's no God, there's no Satan, but there's something different. You see why the priests say if they want to, say that it comes from the devil, because it doesn't believe in a God. Yeah, there's something different. So at the beginning of the reservation time period, the Christians were taking certain words and translating them differently to Christian definitions. So Wakatanka, for example, there's more than one. Yeah, there's more than one, and these are organizations. They're not. It's not about good versus evil. They're just different kinds of organizations. But the Christian priests they changed the translation to mean the one Christian God. Yeah. So that's why today you go on a reservation and you ask any old person, what does Wakantaka mean? 99% of the time they're going to tell you it means God, the great creator, the great mystery. But that's incorrect. And Lakota Star Knowledge says that there's more than one, and it's not a God. It's several organizations of beings. And it's not about good versus evil. Yeah. So you see that this is why today most Lakota people, they don't believe Lakota Star Knowledge. They don't know it because they're too used to what they're familiar with, which is Christian influenced. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, like I said, we were physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally attacked, so we became very, very weak, and it was easy then to become Christianized. It was like a brainwashing that happened back then. And children that are born into that in 1910, yeah, they're born into strong Christian households, so they don't know these things. Then they were sent to boarding school and tortured for, if they spoke anything about their culture, they were tortured for that. A lot of children died in those schools. So when the ones who made it, they didn't really survive because all they saw was abuse. So they either grew up to become abusers themselves or victims, or both. But they didn't really survive. They're more like like a post-traumatic stress disorder. They grow up and they try their best, but they haven't really received healthy parenting, so their parenting is really not that effective. So their children are the old people you see on the reservation today. They grew up also in Christian households and not ever hearing Lakota Star Knowledge. So that's why a lot of old people today don't know Lakota Star Knowledge stories. Many times I've had elders call me asking me, like maybe some school or whatever asked them to give a presentation of the 7 Lakota ceremonies, and they only knew 4 of them. They didn't know what the other 3 were. It shouldn't be that way. I should be calling them. See, my teachers were holy people. That's why I know these things. Yeah? And a lot of elders, they were brainwashed. Yeah, all they know is what is Christian influenced. And so when it comes time to saying, okay, now that people are learning that we have 7 sacred ceremonies, and they want these. They think that today's old people know everything, and they really don't, because of what happened to them in the beginning of the reservation. Today's old people are not the connection to the past, the ancient past. I mean, they don't know Lakota Star Knowledge. But because they're old, people think they do. People don't realize that what happened on the early days of the reservation is when we lost most of our culture. Just a handful of us kept it. But we didn't talk about it because it was against the law. And America made a mental asylum in Canton, South Dakota for any Indian in America that did not become a Christian. They said you were radical. You must be crazy. So they sent you there. And they sent all the medicine men and women there too, because they didn't want the Indians to go to them for help. They wanted to take away any chance of hope for them to, keep to their Indian ways. They wanted Indians to become Christians. So, and they create this mental hospital, asylum, where if you don't become a Christian, you get sent there. And if you're a medicine man or medicine woman, they send you there too to die. So this way, the people on the reservation have no choice but to become Christian. People don't realize this is what happened. This is why most of today's Lakota people and Indian people in general don't know really their complete culture. And what they do are Christianized, sanitized, watered down versions of all these stories. And they talk about the white buffalo calf woman. Everybody thinks, oh, this is a sacred, she's just so full of goodness and happiness and positivity. That's not true. She killed a man and left him with nothing but bones and rattlesnakes going through his rib cage. By a part of her body, not her mouth, but a part of her body that had teeth in it. So when he tried to do something to her, she consumed him, literally. They don't want to talk about that. But that's part of the story. You see what I mean? Sanitized versions exist only today. So it's not about good versus evil. It's about learning from difficulty and enjoying blessings. And when you learn from difficulty, that brings blessings. That's what it's about. Yeah? So that's why I said this story that I told tonight. A lot of Lakota, even older Lakota people, they're not going to believe it because it doesn't fit what they're familiar with. But the problem is, what they're familiar with is Christianized, sanitized, dualized versions of stories, but not the original. And that is sad. Yeah, some of these stories are pretty vicious. But it's because the people involved are incredibly unhealthy.